9 years old, before an altar in Carthage. A boy was forced to swear an oath that would change the course of humanity. He did not swear loyalty or peace. He swore eternal hatred toward Rome. Hannibal Barca was not merely a general. He was the living nightmare of the greatest superpower of antiquity. While everyone said it was impossible, he crossed the Alps with elephants, ice, and blood, just to prove one thing, that Rome's brute force was useless against a superior mind. At Cannae, he executed the most perfect military maneuver in history. A smaller army that did not simply win, but swallowed 80,000 Roman legionaries in a single day of pure slaughter. How did one man manage to encircle an army that outnumbered and outpowered him? Today, on Oblivion Wars, we will break down step by step the strategy that humiliated Rome, a strategy still studied in military academies to this day. Are you ready to witness tactical perfection? To understand Cannae, you need to understand what was at stake. We are in the year 218 before Christ. Carthage, the great power of the Western Mediterranean, had just emerged from a humiliating war against Rome. The First Punic War ended with the Carthaginians losing Sicily, paying colossal reparations, and swallowing their pride in silence. But Carthage did not forget, and the Barca family least of all. Hannibal Barca, Hannibal's father, spent the last years of his life building a new Carthaginian empire in Hispania, not to rest, to prepare his revenge. When Hamilcar died in battle, his son-in-law Hasdrubal took command, and when Hasdrubal was assassinated, power passed to the young Hannibal, who was only 25 years old. Rome made the classic mistake of underestimating a young adversary. They expected an inexperienced general. They received a phenomenon, the March of the Impossible. In 218 BC, Hannibal did the unthinkable, departing from Hispania with an army of mercenaries, Numidian horsemen, Iberian warriors, and war elephants. He marched toward the Alps at the onset of autumn. The Alps in October were not an obstacle. They were a death sentence. Snow, extreme cold, narrow passes, and hostile tribes attacking from the heights. In 15 days of crossing, Hannibal lost thousands of men and most of his elephants. But he arrived in Italy. Rome did not believe it. It simply could not enter the senators' minds that an entire army had crossed the Alps, until the reports began to arrive, and with them terror, a sequence of humiliations. The moment he set foot in northern Italy, Hannibal wasted no time. At the Ticino River, he defeated the Roman cavalry in a first engagement. At the Trebia River, he lured an entire consular army into a trap and destroyed it in the winter of 218 BC. At Lake Trasimene, in 217 BC, he ambushed a Roman column on the march, killing around 15,000 men, including the consul commanding them. 3 defeats. 3 humiliated consuls. The Senate appointed a dictator, Quintus Fabius Maximus, who adopted a strategy of attrition. Avoid direct combat, cut Hannibal's supply lines. Let time work in Rome's favor. The strategy was working, but the Roman people did not want to wait. They wanted blood. They wanted revenge, and Hannibal knew exactly how to exploit that. In 216 BC, Fabius Maximus's mandate came to an end. The elections brought 2 new consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, experienced and cautious, and Gaius Terentius Varro, a man of the people, impulsive, who promised the Romans a swift and decisive victory. The Senate decided to bet everything. It doubled the size of the army. It recruited 8 reinforced legions, Italian allies, heavy infantry, cavalry. The result was the largest army Rome had ever put in the field, somewhere around 80,000 men. The idea was simple: crush Hannibal by brute force. Field numbers so superior that any enemy maneuver would be irrelevant. The Carthaginian army was smaller, operating in enemy territory, far from home, with no reinforcements. All it took was enough pressure to compress it. The problem was that Hannibal had been waiting for exactly that, the chosen ground. Hannibal knew Rome had enlarged its army. He knew the Romans were coming with everything they had, and he needed specific terrain to execute what he had planned. He found it at Cannae, an open plain in Apulia, in southeastern Italy, close to the Aufidus River. Flat ground, no mountains or forests to protect the Roman flanks. A perfect field for cavalry, a field that transformed Rome's numbers into a vulnerability rather than an advantage. Hannibal also read the wind. In the region, a hot and dry wind called the Vulturnus blew, lifting dust from the ground. He positioned his army so that the wind blew from behind his lines toward the Romans. Dust in the enemy's eyes. A small detail, a real advantage. On August 2nd, 216 BC, the two armies met on the field of Cannae. Rome with its 80,000, Hannibal with his 40-odd thousand. And the Carthaginian general had a plan no one had attempted before on that scale. 4. The perfect strategy, the double envelopment. Every strategy begins with reading the enemy. And Hannibal read the Romans with surgical precision. He knew how they fought. The Roman legion was a machine built for frontal combat. It formed a dense mass of infantry, advanced, and destroyed everything in its path through discipline and brute force. The tighter the formation, the more lethal. So Hannibal did something that appeared suicidal. He encouraged that formation, the center that yields. At the center of his line, Hannibal placed his Iberian and Celtic warriors, forming a bulge that protruded toward the Romans, like a belly thrust forward. When combat began, the Romans did exactly what they always did. They pushed with everything they had. Their heavy infantry advanced against the Carthaginian center and began to prevail. The Iberian and Celtic bulge began to yield, to fall back, to bow inward. The Romans tasted victory. They pushed even harder. They packed even tighter. The mass of 80,000 men compacted, funneled inward, following the enemy's center as it retreated. It was exactly what Hannibal wanted. The wings that close. At the edges of the line, Hannibal had positioned his elite African infantry, the most seasoned veterans, equipped with weapons captured from the Romans themselves in previous battles. They stood still, waiting. As the center gave way and the Romans pushed deeper, those African wings held firm. And then, at the calculated moment, they pivoted. They folded inward. They advanced along the flanks of the Roman army which, consumed by the center, never noticed what was happening on its sides. The cavalry that seals the fate. But the final blow came from the sides of the field. On the Carthaginian left wing, Hasdrubal, the heavy cavalry commander, attacked the Roman cavalry and destroyed it in open combat. The Roman cavalry on the right wing, under Lucius Aemilius Paulus, was swept from the field. Then Hasdrubal did something few generals of antiquity would have had the discipline to do. Instead of pursuing the fleeing Romans, which would have been instinctive, he reined in his horsemen. He turned. He crossed the entire field. And he struck from the rear the allied Italian cavalry of Rome, which was still fighting on the opposite end. With the allied cavalry destroyed, Hasdrubal completed the movement. His riders encircled the Roman army from the rear. The encirclement was closed. The perfect trap. 80,000 Romans were now inside a ring. Flanks blocked by the African infantry. Front locked by the Carthaginian center, which had stopped retreating. Rear sealed by the cavalry. And here lies the most cruel detail of the entire maneuver. There were so many Romans, so tightly packed within the encirclement, that the men could barely lift their arms to fight. The human mass was so dense that the dead remained standing, held upright by the living around them. 80,000 men, and they could not even wield their weapons. The Carthaginians simply killed them. The massacre, a day that stopped the world. The battle lasted hours. And by the end of that August day, the field of Cannae was blanketed in the dead. The historical records of Polybius and Livy point to Roman losses of between 50 and 70,000 men killed in combat in a single day, more than any Western nation would lose in a single day of battle until the 20th century. Among the dead was Consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus, who chose to die alongside his soldiers. 80 Roman senators had enlisted as officers in that army. Most perished on the field. In a single day, Rome lost a significant share of its ruling class. In Carthage, when the news arrived, there was celebration. In Rome, there was official mourning. Women were forbidden from weeping in public, so as not to spread panic. The Senate convened an emergency session. Hannibal had done the impossible twice. First by crossing the Alps, then by destroying the largest army Rome had ever assembled. After Cannae, Italian allies of Rome began to defect to Hannibal's side. Capua, the second largest city in Italy, opened its gates to the Carthaginians. The Italian Confederation, which Rome had built over generations, was fracturing. The road to Rome seemed open. And then the Carthaginian general Hannibal, commander of the cavalry, reportedly said to Hannibal a phrase that would be recorded in history: "In 5 days you could dine on the capital." Hannibal did not advance. The reasons are debated to this day. Lack of siege equipment, the absence of reinforcements from Carthage, which sent insufficient support, the wager that Rome would surrender diplomatically in the face of such a catastrophic defeat. The fact remains that Hannibal camped in southern Italy, waiting for a Roman collapse that never came. Rome did not surrender. It never negotiated. The Senate forbade any discussion of peace. It raised new armies. It returned to Fabius Maximus' strategy: attrition, avoiding direct confrontation, attacking Carthaginian supply lines. And it wore Hannibal down, year after year, as the war spread to Hispania and North Africa. 15 years after Cannae, the young Roman general Scipio Africanus defeated Hannibal at Zama, in North Africa, in 202 BC. Carthage was finally destroyed in 146 BC, decades after Hannibal's own death. The most perfect battle in history was not enough to win the war, because Rome was not merely an army. It was an idea, and ideas are far harder to kill. More than 2,000 years have passed since that August day in 216 BC, and Cannae is still taught, in the American Army, at the West Point Military Academy, in the German General Staff, which studied it obsessively and attempted to replicate it in both World War I and World War II. Alfred von Schlieffen, the architect of Germany's 1914 war plan, declared Cannae an open obsession. The concept of double envelopment, of encircling the enemy by using his own momentum as a trap, became the supreme ideal of Western military theory. No other battle of antiquity is cited as frequently in modern military manuals. No other maneuver is considered as close to tactical perfection. Hannibal had no satellites. He had no instant communication between his commanders. He did not have Rome's resources. He had observation, intelligence, the ability to read human behavior, and the capacity to transform the enemy's predictability into their own destruction. He did not win with more soldiers. He won with an idea. On August 2nd, 216 BC, on the open plain of Apulia, a Carthaginian general with fewer than half the Roman soldiers demonstrated to the world that no amount of brute force surpasses a mind that knows how to use it. He did not merely win a battle. He redefined what was possible in warfare. He created a model that 2 millennia of military technology have still not surpassed in elegance. Rome survived Cannae, but it never forgot. It never forgot the day its 80,000 were encircled, compressed, and destroyed by an enemy less than half its size. Cannae, the day Rome was swallowed.